Transport in the time of COVID-19, update 14th of December. Righty-ho, don't forget you can email me for links and slides there or go to the site. Right, I'm putting that up again because from last week, because that's the thing with the forecast increase in road traffic volumes of up to 51% by 2050. And that's from an official government report, and it will be like that unless we do the alternatives. Okay, new slide for this week. Yeah, here's something. This was from the Daily Mail, but I got it from the MSN thing, so you don't have to click on the Daily Mail site. This is from the Junior Transport Minister, I think at the Como conference. She said, this is Junior Transport Minister Trudy Harrison, said, told a sustainability, owning a car was outdated 20th century thinking, and the country should move to shared mobility to cut carbon emissions. So that no doubt freaked out a few people at the Daily Mail, but that's an interesting quote. Right, yes, someone else, one of my old comrades in arms, John Stewart, who's been an anti-road building campaigner, chaired Road Peace, is current chair of Campaign for Better Transport, wrote an article in the Sunday Telegraph saying that he didn't like low traffic neighborhoods, and he actually tried to explain why he thought that on Carlton Reid's podcast. So there's the link if you want to hear what John was saying. I haven't actually listened to it yet, but he was coming up with some arguments which I don't think were very good. If you go to this thread from John Burke, he has a number of tweets referring to the evidence explaining why John's wrong. And there was a fair amount of fairly forceful tweeting, and I weighed in and I said, you know, don't sort of get at John, and personally he does tend to go off on his own sometimes. Anyway, he said he didn't like low traffic neighborhoods, and that he wanted to have smart road user pricing, reallocation of road space, support for public transport. And a few of us were saying, yeah, but we're going to need low traffic neighborhoods as well as part of the package. And so I think we got the message over there. But these things do happen. People occasionally break ranks, and you have to respond in a polite and well worked out way, and it's good for kind of reformulating your arguments and getting them right. Right, this is a big one. Look at that chart. Here's something, you know, the sinister network of proponents of low traffic neighborhoods, bus gates and cycleways, which some anti-LTN conspiracy theorists put up on social media. And I'm very annoyed that I'm not on that list. Neither are Steve and Sally and Claire. Carlton Reid's not on it, actually, although Peter Walker, Laura Laker are. But I'm pleased to see that Brian Deegan, and there's Brian, and Ruth. Ruth is on the list somewhere, yes, and her son. There's Ruth, yes, very good. So here's this sort of frenetically complicated list of how all these people are conspiring to have low traffic neighborhoods from Mr. Johnson downwards. And they haven't actually got most of the people pushing LTNs outside London. They've got a few from the provinces. Actually, we had a good laugh at this, but I don't know if I'm going completely bonkers, but after a bit of going over it in detail, I thought, well, it's actually quite useful to identify who's been supporting low traffic neighborhoods in London boroughs and some of the people who may support them. So could be potentially useful as a list. Although it is a bit bonkers, and I don't quite understand how Phil Jones is the father of Ben Knowles of Pedal Me App, but what do I know?
It was news to Phil, by the way.
It was news to him. Well, you know, maybe he'd been sowing his wild oats 45 years ago. I don't know. Anyway, so there's that. Okay, the Green Alliance did a report on, I mean, they're a fairly kind of mainstream greenie organization, and they did a bit on how there's an effort, a need to reduce car travel, and they specified here, allocate more long-term funding for local authorities to invest in active travel, allowing walking and cycling to replace around 40% of car journeys under 3 miles. And the reference there I put in is a reference up here, which you can't possibly see because of the screen sharing thing, but it's an article in Transportation Research, volume 123. Research found that 41% trips under 3 miles could be substituted by walking or cycling, and that if the threshold was at 5 miles, 11.2% more could be replaced by cycling. Anyway, so that's a report you may want to look at. I've given the reference a bit later in the reading list. Now, that is actually referred to in an article by Roger Geffen here. New evidence shows we need fewer cars, not just newer cars. And I'll give one quote from it. Using government projections together with a more optimistic in-between scenario from the Green Alliance report, this estimates the annual mileage traveled by car needs to reduce by 20 to 27% by 2030 if the government is to remain on the balanced pathway to reach its net zero target as recommended by the Committee on Climate Change. Don't forget the CCC is a statutory body. Now, I really, really strongly recommend that you get hold of that article. It references, it's really Roger at his precise best. It gets all the relevant sources and relevant documents referred to. So do get that article, read it, and put it in your files. It's a definite must read. Yeah, I mentioned this last week. This is about tackling road injustice. It's not new anymore, but you should definitely look at it. That's sort of rumbling along in the background. Yeah, victim blame for quite a while. You know, this was stopped, but I personally still haven't heard back from Will Norman, so you know we do need to check up that TfL and others don't do this again. There were 70 responses, 70 complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority. Yeah, donate to the Cyclist Defence Fund because they are funding judicial reviews and Shoreham. I can't remember which one it is. It's Shoreham Road or Shoreham, West Shoreham or Upper Shoreham or High Shoreham, whichever one it is that they're fighting. Do go to that and do look at what they're doing. It's a good way if you're looking to pay for charities. I know there are loads of them like Road Peace and Cycling UK and LCC and Wheels for Wellbeing, and of course you can give money to Road Danger Reduction Forum, although we're not a charity, but do look at that. Reading list consultations, what's new? There's one Steve sent me about e-scooters on the continent. A nice little article by Henry Mance in the Financial Times. He keeps on pressure about active travel and gets slated for it on Twitter, but he's a voice in the mainstream camp. More reading, that's the reference to the Green Alliance report. Quite a nice article on Forbes about hydrogen, because when you start getting into EVs, people are popping up saying, oh, hydrogen's going to fix it. That's the new fuel. It'll all be wonderful. And here's a nice corrective there. The other new link I want you to look at is this one here from Transport Action Network. They are, you know, trying to get people to oppose It's not now risk 2, it's risk 3, I'm afraid we're on, Roads Investment Strategy 3. So do go to that link, and they're another organisation that can always do with extra money for any JRs that they're putting forward, or to fund them going anyway. UK, Manchester City Council, remember all those horrible boxes that I showed you on the footways? They've been replaced by screens. Well, what you think about them? You know, there are others which, you know, maybe they're part of the streetscape you want. I don't know. Up to you to comment. Oh yeah, we talked about this last week. I don't know if anybody knows any more about.
Yeah.
Mark, if you want to come in, yes.
Well, I have one extra council, Thurrock, who had a 40% cut, so they got 60%. But I have no news of any others. But me and Roger and Simon's been copied in, or getting a PQ, 2 PQs actually sorted out, hopefully before Christmas, on both the capability and the active travel fund. Adam Cochran needs to sort out a pet MP to ask. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. A friendly, supportive MP to ask a question on our behalf of the minister, and it's going to say, "Can you give more details? Can you tell us what's happened?" And when we know that, we'll know more, hopefully, or maybe not.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Mark. Okay, this is what's happening in London, around my neck of the woods. Family-friendly ride on quiet streets. It's a critical mass in Harlesden. So that's nice, and that's been done by various active mothers like Sylvia Gautreau and Amandina Alexandra. And Brent, oops, Islington, yeah, there's another consultation. Do keep an eye on these consultations. Unless you fill them in and say the LTN or whatever it is good, you know, they won't be made permanent. Okay, Enfield, the Bowes Road LTN is to be made permanent. They note a 20% increase in cycling, 40% increase in walking, 70% reduction in vehicular traffic overall, 7% reduction on the boundary main roads, reduction in crime, etc. So that's a good one. Hounslow, yeah, now this is to come into Critical Friends and so on. Hounslow Council are advertising that the Dr. Bike team will be there to, you know, help ordinary commuter cyclists. So what they use as a graphic is racing cyclists or people doing a sportive who are young or 20 or 30 something blokes wearing racing clothing. And the thing about this is it's already been complained about. Ruth got in touch with the Marcoms team and said, look, you know, that's not the right image for ordinary people. So, you know, what do you do when they keep on putting the wrong stuff up? And actually, there's another image, which I haven't got, from Hounslow, saying, you know, trying to get hold of ordinary commuter cyclists and say, oh, you know, what are your tips for not arriving sweaty at work, and have you found nice routes to work, and trying to set up a local commuter cyclist organization. And they illustrate it with a shot from a men's road race on a closed circuit, which is, you know, really the wrong imaging. And we have been saying this for years and years and years. That isn't happening, and it's a big annoyance. Okay, now I do have to say, I didn't get a scan of this, but when I come off my slide, I'll show you. Okay, but I'll just finish off with a nice cartoon. That's from the New Yorker, talking about the absurdity of going somewhere to sit on a stationary bike. Just one more thing. I don't know if I can get this up. This is an advert in my current issue of London Cycling Campaigns magazine. It's for an e-bike, or what's supposed to be an e-bike, our bypass option that goes at 28 miles an hour. And I think that's illegal for e-bikes, or at least under British conditions. So no doubt Simon will say something about it, but not a good look. You know, it's like having Christmas parties. You can't tell people not to do Christmas parties if you're going to have one yourself. So that's about it. Yes, if anybody can correct me on anything, please. Ruth,
that's great. I'm not sure who had their hand up first, but Simon, I think you might have been, I did see you in the chat, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, on the London cycling stuff, there was two things I said, but I can't remember what the first one was because it's way back up the list now. So I'm scrolling while I talk. On the e-bike thing, just be aware that this got kicked straight to the team who run the ads, and that won't happen again. And that's being dealt with quite seriously. So we weren't happy about that. Of course, it's a classic example of the fact that basically the ad folks who sell the ads are not necessarily the same people as me. I try and do my job rather than theirs. So that one's not
Simon, can I just, on that issue though, the UK distributors, when you go to them, actually make the point quite well. But the ad was with the manufacturers in Europe rather than the UK distributors. So there's an odd thing going on there as well about who sells the bike and who advertises it.
Yeah, of course there is. And there's also the fact that this is actually a legal bike. It's effectively a moped with pedals on rather than e-bike, but it's being marketed as an e-bike, which is obviously completely daft. So anyway, just rest assured, mainly I was going to say on that one, rest assured that that won't happen again. And apologies. And I can't remember what the other thing is, but if anyone pointed it out to me, I'll cover it as well.
The advert, TfL's advert, I think, Simon.
Yeah, so we've had some meetings with TfL folks over that one, and again, I'm hoping that won't happen again either. I think there was some belated recognition that they have not done a brilliant job on engaging well with active travel groups on this kind of content. I think there is still some work to do on getting them to perceive why, increasing empathy, which I think is the aim of their kind of advertising campaign. They wanted to increase empathy for vulnerable road users, and there's a bit of work still to do on getting them to see quite why that advert was a disastrously bad approach at doing that. But they kind of have grasped it to some extent now, and we're pushing them. So yeah, just be aware there is still ongoing work on that advert.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, it's worrying though that it got so far through, didn't it? It must have been checked by so many people, and yeah.
If I can just come back on that briefly, when you say it was checked by so many people,
well, you'd hope so.
In actual fact, I think that's one of the big issues here, right, is that this advert coincided in timing with yet another disastrous round of negotiations between the DfT and TfL. So loads of the people who you would expect to have seen this advert didn't necessarily see this advert because they were looking at other things at the time. And I think that was probably part of the problem here, is that there were a whole cadre of folks. Another issue that we're raising with TfL at the moment is their engagement processes have gone all completely screwy as well on cycling and walking. And there just doesn't seem to be anyone at TfL in the higher echelons in the way that there used to be, Lily Matson, Ben Ploud and people like that who were very, very senior at TfL, very, very obvious champions of active travel. There isn't anyone like that at the moment. So Will Norman's looking a little bit out on his own at the moment, and we're very keen for that not to be an ongoing thing. So yeah, I think there are some issues here at TfL, and most of them primarily to do with just funding and the short-term nature of the way the funding deals are going.
Thanks. Ruth, I think you had your hand up next.
Hi. Yes, could we invite Roger Geffin to speak on the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill second day as it was discussed in the House of Lords? For any of you who sign up to They Work For You, I got it this morning and read it, and it is quite dismaying what a couple of the Lords are saying. which is saying about sending a careless driver to prison would be wholly disproportionate. Roger apparently has commented on it, but it would be very useful for him to come back to us, as it is a very important bill for all of us. So can that be added to a list, please?
Is there anything you want to add to that, Bob? Are you?
Yeah, Roger, I think it'd be good to have Roger. I think there's two things he can speak on. One is the thing about the amount of motor vehicle reduction required, which I had in that first article I referred to. I'll put that link in the chat as well. The other thing is specifically on the justice issue. So I think it's actually they're both important, and I think he could do sessions on each one, frankly. I don't know what we feel about that.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
One more thing, yeah, about John Stewart. Yes, he is also the chair of Campaign for Better Transport, and CBT actually put out a tweet saying that's John's personal views. It's not our views as an organisation. So they're supportive of LTNs.
Yeah, that's great. Roxanne, you had your hand up next.
Hi everyone, hello. It's been so long. I'm so sorry I haven't been coming to Ideas with Beers, but I've had a standing conflict for about the last year, which has just changed. So hopefully I can come back to Ideas with Beers. But just a little bit of news from Cambridge that I think will be of interest to people here or your contacts. We are hiring and it is going to be somebody's absolute dream job. We've stolen Simon's job title and called it infrastructure campaigner. So CamCycle is hiring an infrastructure campaigner, and this role will be about bringing that detail of infrastructure and policy into the staff team, because the workload has just been too much for volunteers and current staff to do. So really being that expert on what is the kind of policy or infrastructure that needs to be applied in certain areas, and really about enabling communities to do this work. So not doing it for them, but helping write the policies. Oh, Simon's changed job title. Well, we've stolen what you had. Anyway, so using this knowledge and this skill to really work with local communities to work out what they need on their patch, and how to campaign, making sure we've got all the policies in place so that people can find us and work out what they need to do for their area. I mean, a bit more to it than that. Based in Cambridge, and we are super, super flexible about hours, timing. You do need to be in the Cambridge area, but certainly working from home and so on is possible as well in this new world. But anyway, if you're interested, you can go to our website, camcycle.org.uk/work with us. So thanks for letting me put in my little pitch there.
That's great. It's very exciting. It's always good to grow.
Yeah, it's good to grow, but it's hard work growing as well. But it's sort of like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But it's been a huge amount of work to raise the money for this. So we are so excited to have this person join us next year.
Yeah, fantastic. And Mark, I think after Mark, then I think we'll move on because we've got a couple of talks.
Okay, two very quick things. This may have been reported, but I was doing some searching for Hansard. As I said, I'm hoping to get some parliamentary questions. And on November the 4th, I don't know if Roger saw this, there was a response not from Chris Heaton-Harris, but from a different minister, who was the different Minister of State, Andrew Stevenson, who was very clear in Hansard about consultation not being a veto. So there's a report in there. I can put the link up, but it does say there's always a balance to strike, and basically saying, you should pay attention to consultation, but you shouldn't be allowing local authorities, local communities to have a veto based on the fact they don't like something. So that's now on the record again. So, and that just snuck through on November the 4th. So it may have been reported. And while we're on job ads, we're doing some work in Morecambe, and they're just advertised for so Morecambe Bay. So if anyone wants to go and work there are 2 cycling and walking project officers starting in March for 2 years. So if anyone wants to go up and work in a very nice part of the rural countryside near Lancaster, there are 2 jobs which they're looking for.
Thanks, Mark. Right, I think we'll move on to our talks now. We've got Charles Carey and Lee Gravner. Charles, are you there?
Yeah.
Did I spot you earlier? Yes, great. So Charles is going to talk about car-free zones. And do you want to see if you can share your screen and
Great.
let you get
Okay,
going?
well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to take you through a presentation I've cobbled up. I did want to sort of try and get somebody else or a few others from Ideas with Beers to sort of hide behind or hide with on this, because it's all a bit of a kite flying exercise. Ruth kindly gave some of her time. Everyone else I approached was busy, so I'm going for this a bit on my own here. So yeah, this is a half-baked idea, but it is Ideas with Beers, so I hope we're all right sharing things which aren't fully thought through. Hold on, how do we just get this Control L? Is that right? Can you see that? Is that shareable?
Yeah, we've got that on screen, Charles.
Great, thanks. So the sort of premise is, I'm going to sort of put forward a fairly contentious premise that if we're going to reduce congestion, that the current sort of business as usual is the shared space agenda, where we're trying to sort of put a lot of effort into infrastructure, cycling infrastructure. And I would argue that the sort of Manchester B-Lines project is probably sort of ahead of the pack of most things. And I'm assuming it's going to work well, and I'm hoping people will copy the B-Lines and it'll slowly spread across the country. And what I'm arguing is that I think this is going to take too long to decongest cities. One obvious way things could speed up is a super COVID variant where we just have fewer people. But that's a fairly dark thought, that. So the real question was, can we do anything about car-free zones? And I'm sure this has been dealt with countless times in the past. So apologies if I'm just going over old ground here. But I was trying to think about solutions for car-free zones. And yeah, just going on to it. What I wanted to focus on, I think you sort of need to break down the problem into 3 stages. The first is proposing a practical solution. The second is finding out how you sort of how you fund it, or what is the economics behind that solution. And I suppose the biggest, by far the biggest issue is getting the behavioural change and the political will. But generally, what I see in the sort of is everyone will say that's the 3 is the too difficult box. So why worry about thinking about number 1, a practical solution? But I just thought it might be, I haven't seen or come across solutions for car-free urban zones. So I thought I'd sort of come up with a few ideas of my own. I don't think it's enough just to say banning cars while we're trying to sort of stop the use of the car in an urban zone. I still think the car has a crucial role to play. I think for many countries it is the best form of transport in between cities, which don't have extensive rail networks. So I think we do owe it to the car. It does have a place. Maybe in the long distant future, we can have sort of fantastic bus routes interurban as well. But at the moment, I'm proposing that people hold on to their cars, but they don't use them in the cities. So I've come up with these urban car-free osmotic cells. They are zones around 6 kilometers in diameter. They're urban zones, which are car-free. I'm not going to talk about how you move around in them. It's going to be relatively simple. You're going to be either using buses or bicycles, and you're going to allow the exceptional car users to move about. So this is less about, I'm assuming that problem is relatively easy to solve, how you move about in the urban zone. The bit that interests me, the so-called osmotic part, is how do you create a semi-permeable membrane where you've got your car, but it isn't allowed into the zone. And so you have this sort of hybrid travel mechanism. So the idea is that people coming in or leaving the urban zone, they have to use either the car or the bicycle to get there, and then they'll pick up their car, or if they're coming in, it's like a park and ride basis. But if they're going out, which park and ride doesn't address, they have to go to their car somewhere on the edge of their urban zone and then use it to go to travel wherever they're going to. When they leave it on the boundary of this zone, they will use the bicycle, use either the bus. I drew these little sort of loops of buses. They would have to be every sort of 5 to 10 minutes. So you'd have to sort of really cost out an effective bus transport network, and they would take people in, or they would be taking people out of the urban zone to their car. I was pleased that I came across Brian's presentation at COP26, and he was actually talking about buses in it, and I was quite pleased to see that's a picture of York on the left, and he was saying it just sort of underlined how much there is to do on buses anyway. He put a very sort of cogent argument about how buses really need rerouting and replanning, and I was quite pleased to see those loops very similar to those loops, although he wasn't talking about a car-free zone, he was just talking about tidying up buses. So that was comforting. Now, the other thing you'd have on your boundary is a whole bunch of sort of bike stations where you'd pick up cargo bikes or public bikes or electric bikes. And of course, they'd have to be dotted fairly extensively around the periphery, because wherever you left your car, you don't want to walk too far to get your bike. And then in larger sort of cities, covering larger areas, these cells would have to be sort of stuck together. And you'd have to sort of have the boundary serving 2 cells or 3 cells. So one of the things I first thought was, well, where are we going to put the cars? The obvious one's car parks. I thought, well, can we use existing roads, and can we look at what the capacity of taking roads and obviously making them narrower and slower, but using a space to park the cars. So suddenly you might have a sort of a 30 or 40 mile an hour boundary road, and suddenly it's becoming a 20 mile an hour road where you're literally putting your car or taking, leaving it or taking it. And could you use that existing space? And just, I'm not a traffic planner, but I was just glancing at what sort of capacity you could get, and that graph just shows there's quite a large range of capacities there, depending on what you've already got. The other one is car parks. I was trying to work out what sort of area you need for car parks. Just a little bit of analysis. I don't know how accurate that is. 220 cars per hectare. I have no idea if that's a realistic or overestimate, underestimate of how many cars you can get in a given space. What's interesting, I was using Google Earth to work this out, but this was the Stansted Airport medium stay car park, and it almost represents what I'm talking about. You leave your car and you wait 10 minutes, and a bus turns up and takes you to the terminal. So this is the sort of way these car-free zones would be working, and the bus, I think, is crucial. Whereas we're all pro-cycling in this group, you have to cater for the non-cyclists, and therefore these car-free zones would have a plethora, hopefully, of electric buses, maybe small buses. So that's the diagram. The question is, can try and take some real-life examples. Well, I thought I'd start with my own city, Worcester. This is a slide from an earlier presentation I gave last year, where I was, all the blue and oranges, I was saying Worcester's full of low traffic neighborhoods already. The real problem are all the red roads, which are just congested. And the proposal in last year's presentation was, can we just put in a whole bunch of low cost speed cameras and enforce 20 miles an hour? But in this proposal, I'm saying, well, no, we just don't have the cars in there at all. So the yellow and orange lines, those are your bus loop routes, the sort of taking people either to or from their parked car, which is on the red line. The little green dots are all the sort of various bike stations. So you've got the choice there. On the right, you probably have electric bikes because it's a little bit hilly going into Worcester. Also, you can note that the moment you look at a real life example, your pretty diagrams start falling over. So, Worcester isn't surrounded by boundary roads. The top left shows that you'd actually need a car park built, and again a bike station, and you wouldn't have a looping bus route. You'd have more like a park and ride sort of linear route just going in. One of the key things, it's all very well doing this, is what's the price to pay for this? So if I take my daughter who lives in a flat in the middle of Worcester, studying nursing, she had to get up at 5 a.m. to drive 40 minutes to Hereford for in-placement training. And I'll be asking her to get up 10 minutes earlier to cycle or wait for a bus to get to her car and then do the journey. And that's a big ask. That's an extra 20 minutes a day on 12-hour shifts. And this is the reality, that for this sort of thing to work, you have to address that person's needs. It's all very well making it car free. What are they going to get in return? And I think the big issue here, if I just say that's her flat, it's in that building there, typical one-way, horrendous traffic, noisy car route. And what the real issue here is, it's not enough to make a protected cycle lane. There's no way anyone's going to go to their car if it's just business as usual and cars with protected cycleways. What the whole issue here is, there are no cars. You're getting rid of the cars, and what do you get in return? You've got to create a really nice environment. You suddenly got more road space than you need. And I think noise is the big issue. One of the biggest benefits of car-free areas is reduced noise. I think the whole emissions argument, whether they're local or global, is a bonus. But I think people might really value quieter neighborhoods to the extent that they might pay the price of that extra time for their journey. So I was trying to sort of put some figures to this. And again, this is very much sort of back of fag packet. I was trying to work out how many cars are resident in Worcester. Population 100,000, average of just over 2 per household, probably well over 1 car per household. So I'm guessing around the 60,000 cars sort of sit in Worcester. Now, that could be way under, it could be way over. Well, I don't think it's way over, but it could be under. So the 60,000 cars there, and I was trying to work out how much could you fit in the car park to the northwest, and how many cars could you fit on the boundary roads. And again, quite contentious what I'm proposing, that's a bypass in the bottom going around there. And I'm actually proposing that you would be closing off one half of the dual carriageway, turning it into a crawler lane with parking either side, diagonal parking either side. And then you're left just with a simple two-way on the other side. And you could say, well, that defeats the whole point of the bypass. And you might find some interesting results that a lot of the bypass traffic is made up of the interurban traffic and so on and so forth. Either way, the figures were coming out at around sort of 12 to 25% of the resident car population could be placed on the edge. If we said 20%, and if we say that there are cars coming into Worcester as well as cars going out, and we split it 50-50, we're saying 10% can go out using this system and 10% can come in. Now, obviously, if a lot more are going out today, if 30% of cars are going out of Worcester, that's not enough. So we'll need more car parks, or we need another system. So the first conclusions I came to on that level were that I don't think boundary roads, they're probably not enough. They might be. Obviously, we need more traffic flow data. I was just literally doing back a fag packet. And we need more driver flow data, because the idea is if you're like a 3 days or more person going out to work outside your city, then that's where you would be high priority to leave your car on the edge of the city. If you're just going out for the weekend, then you might need a whole system in point 4, a sort of a pass out system. You've got your car sitting there on the drive, you do all your week inside the city, but you want to go out for family to the country or just go out, whatever, on the weekend. So you need to devise some system that you can drive from the centre of Worcester out, and you don't have to leave the car on the edge. So it's all fiendishly complex, but I wouldn't say it's looking sort of semi-feasible to deal with certain scenarios, but as I say, you need to have more rich data set to see how workable this is. And then I really stuck my neck out. I thought, oh, I'll just see what Greater Manchester would look like, a bunch of hexagon cells. Well, they're not hexagon at all there, but they're roughly that sort of 6 kilometre maximum dimension. Now, if you look at that, don't try and ignore the red lines. The red lines are the borough boundaries, Trafford and Stockport, Manchester, and so on, Salford. The blue lines were my sort of attempts at thinking, well, where are you going to put all these cars? And I suppose straight away I was getting into deep water, thinking this is not a simple problem. If you look at the bottom there, you've got Altrincham on the left and sort of Stockport on the right. And a bit like Worcester, they're not surrounded by boundaries, so you've got to deal with a whole issue of unless you build a boundary road, you've got to sort of deal with the fact that not all urban areas are surrounded by roads which can be used for this concept. And again, I was just thinking, well, what happens if you could make a gigantic car park? And I was hunting around, where's there free space in the Manchester area to sort of drop great big car parks? And you can't just rob existing land which is woodland or playing fields. And I sort of found a bleak looking bit of farmland out beyond Trafford Park, and I thought, oh, maybe you could put one there. But anyway, it's clearly, I'm getting way out of my depth here, but I just was just thinking, well, we've got the B lines in this area. Can you seriously think of a bunch of cells without cars in the whole Manchester metropolitan area? Just to focus on that for a minute, if you take the center, if you look at the white square there inside the central car-free zone, if you're to enlarge that, you know, that's what it looks like. You've got a bit of a boundary road up there in the top right, and you've got this huge area which is car-free, and you've got to sort of think, well, this is ridiculous. You know, we've got buses and bicycles. We haven't had to put a spade in the ground to make a single bikeway because we're just using existing roads. But we've got more tarmac than we need now. And if we were to zoom in there, you know, look at Mancunian Way cutting across left to right, it becomes totally pointless now. So what do? Do we blow it up? Do we build houses on it? Do we put football pitches on it? Either way, there's a surplus of real estate to use. And if we're in a sort of capitalist society, we'd be saying, well, come on, let's build houses, let's put it over to the private development. And if there's one group of companies which could probably take on the car and oil people, it's the property developers. But we can't do that. This is public land, and it's for everyone to use. There is one private use. Here's an example of how many people use their own personal land just to put their car. So in a car-free zone, you would actually be giving these people back some space to put a garden there or whatever. But that's many areas people just have to put their car there, and so you would be freeing up that private land. But the public land, it's up to one's imagination as to what you do with it. This is a link to some rather nice, it's too ambitious to show these live, so I'm just showing. The picture on the left is these little dynamic, if you go to this link, you'll see these little 1-minute films of this person, what's his name, Jan Kamensky. He's taken I think it's Berlin, this particular one, and you look through the 1-minute film, and the lampposts float up into the air and the cars float up into the air. And then suddenly you completely transform the area, and you get something on the right, which is all very idyllic. But that point on the right is that imagination. That is the prize to get your car-free zone, because you know, if you get the bit on the right, you get the inhabitants behind you, even if they've got cars stuck on the edge of the city. There's another one he did of New York. On the top left, if you look carefully, you might see some cars. I took a screenshot. There's a car already floating up into the air. But they're worth looking at, these little cartoons. And what's quite nice is they have a sound overlay. So you get all the sound of the traffic on the left, and on the right, you get all the sort of quietness which comes with a car-free zone. So I think that's the big prize, reduce noise. This is a half-baked idea. I think my conclusion is get some of the real pros on it. Shane Bryan's not here. I'd challenge him to say, stop designing Cyclops junctions, Bryan. Get on to sort of some serious thinking on what a car-free zone would look like, and maybe get some guy like Robin Lovelace looking at some academic sort of modeling or whatever. And if we can get some good practical solutions, then we move on to the economics, and then we move on to the big elephant in the room, which is the behavioral one. But I do think we need some practical proposals, and this I was just trying to put something forward to stimulate debate. And yeah, I just want to another thing I shared last year. I just want to read this out. This is from the Book of Trespass. The way space is divided, or in other words, the way place is constructed, has a direct influence on the people who operate within it. It affects their habits, customs, and ideologies. The decision of who and what space is for directly shapes the structure of the society within it. What is allowed, what is encouraged, and what is forbidden. And I feel that it is up to our imagination as to what we would do with that free space, which is now given over to traffic. Because with bicycles and buses, I think we've got more than enough space, just bicycles and buses. We've got more than enough space to think imaginatively of how to make our cities better. So that was all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. That was quite a kind of super ambitious think outside the box, and I think it's always good to kind of challenge challenge what we're doing and what we're thinking about. I think though I think a lot of people commented that it's really this space issue, and where do you put all those cars? I see a few hands up. Dave, do you want to chip in? Do you want to, if you stop sharing your screen?
Oh yeah, sorry. Wait a minute. I've got a duff computer. Hold on. Just bear with me. Oh God, 1 second. I'm going to make a mess of this. Hold on.
Don't worry. I'll start firing in if it's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay.
For you, Charles.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I made a comment of using the road for parking when you've got people coming to events. Bank Street in Inverness on a Sunday about 11 o'clock. They allow parking on Sunday. Parking restrictions are removed for people attending church services. Most unusual parking restriction. But 11 o'clock, it's like the We Free Grand Prix. They all rush out of church and start off, and there's traffic chaos. And I can foresee that. You don't move people with cars. The Arndale Centre in Manchester had a report last week of people queuing for 2 or 3 hours to get out the car park. Because if you put all the cars into a focus point and you've only got 2 or 3 exit routes from it, and you have people actually coming in to do shopping or work that always finishes at the same time, you create this problem. We see it in Glasgow. We get 2 hours congestion per day. The rest of the time, the roads are deserted. And that's because 25% of the land area in Glasgow is given over to car parking. We must have 20 or 30,000 parking spaces that would be used normally by daily commuters. And so when they all turn out, a massive traffic jam. The other thing to think about, in Glasgow for 15 years, we've had a free pedicab service operating in the pedestrian zone. So that would be for people who can't walk, but you don't want to bring large motor vehicles in. A great employment opportunity, a very, very friendly, people-friendly thing is to have people circulating in your pedestrian zones with pedicabs and giving that mobility to people who can't manage the walk. And finally, to look at the buses. I've done a lot with buses on Oxford Street, and the eastern end of Oxford Street has, I think it's 7 bus routes. and 63 buses per hour at the peak in the old on the old timings. That could be reduced to one single electric bus route running the length of Oxford Street, running at a frequency of every 2 minutes, and then connecting with the bus routes at either end. So I think it's a very much a matter of changing the thinking of the bus industry. Having free to board full buses, as you do have in Manchester, and the free buses in Manchester, it's cheaper to run them free than to actually collect fares.
Yeah, thanks. So I think we'll move on. I think that whole issue of how you would address movement within those cells is a sort of a slightly kind of that I guess that would be Charles's next stage of what to think about.
Yeah, I would almost think that's the easy bit, the moving inside the cells. The clever bit is to try and deal with the fact that urban environments are breathing. People come in and people leave them, and that's where they use the car. And can you have this sort of this osmotic cell where the people move across the membrane, but the cars don't?
Well, can I just
around in it is I would argue is relatively trivial. Relatively.
I think.
Can I highlight,
Dave? I think we've got quite a lot to get through. So I think can we move on to Steve? You had your hand up. Do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. I love that, Charles. It's brilliant. Really, really wonderful, actually. And funnily enough, just before lockdown, Claire Stocks, Brian Deegan, and a few of us launched a sort of car-free vision for Manchester City Centre. Obviously, pre-thinking your analysis of Greater Manchester. And it was fascinating, actually. And I'll share it with you. But what was also really interesting was most of the arguments against it were actually arguments for better public transport. And it was really quite powerful, actually. And the only final thing I'll say before I send that to you is the car park zone outside Trafford Park that you've highlighted is a peat bog and probably best left alone.
Yeah, chat moss.
Yeah,
that's even better. Then they'll park the cars and they'll sink.
Thanks, Steve. I think who else can I see? Ruth, you got your hand up.
Very quickly, thanks, Charles. That was brilliant. Two things. One, I'll try and do some digging about Chester because it's had park and ride since the 80s, going down the Wrexham Road, and it'd be interesting to see whether that was successful or not. Privatisation of the bus routes didn't help at all, of course. But the other, just to add to your thing, is that Jonathan Kelly, who some of you might follow on Twitter, who's medical, he put a wonderful thing yesterday about people who've had heart attacks, heart disease, are doing cycling training in a park somewhere in the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, and how successful that is to get them back to mobility. So that kind of adds the whole thing about enabling people to live healthy lifestyles by not relying on cars or motorized transport. So Jonathan Kelly, if anyone follows him, it was a very useful thing about health. Thank you.
Right, Sally's had to go, so I'm just becoming the new Sally for the second half of the session. Stephen, we'll go Stephen, then Bryn.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Charles. Lots of inspiring stuff, but I don't think we can rely on park and ride. It's not. I mean, as several people have said, and I just want to repeat the same thing that we're banging on about in XR Roads and trying to support Transport Action Network, is that just for those who aren't aware, the government is still persisting with this National Highways scheme of 16,000. I mentioned this before, it's just an astonishing number. That's lane miles, so there might be Lower Thames Tunnel, for example, is going to be what, six lanes. And which is, they're trying to lock in car dependency in order to sell all these EVs, whatever the size, whether they're mass-produced Chinese ones, which are cheap, so everybody buys them and will use them more than they might now. So that practical point, we've got to be cautious about thinking about designing for ongoing or increased car use. So yeah, that's Road Investment Strategy, RIS2, which is up to 2025, and another 5 years, RIS3, RIS5, 4, and then 5. So that's 4,000 miles of new road or upgraded road. That means dual carriageway, which means it's one level down from a motorway. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. And we'll go to Bryn, and then I think we'll make that the last comment, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do next.
Okay, I'll try and keep this short because I don't think I can present it quite as well as everybody else's erudite thoughts on this. But I've got a kind of feeling about the whole thing, which is that perhaps this issue about thinking about shape and having to come up with the right shape and size of the city is giving ourselves too much of the problem. And the thing I think I'm getting at is that what car dependency has done to us, or is that it has allowed for all sorts of people to relocate the services and facilities that we rely on to become dissipated or concentrated in places that we need to take a car to. So to unpick that, yes, we need to prevent permanent, constant access for motor vehicles, but the next step, rather than thinking about shapes, is actually thinking about how we bring those services and facilities back within reach of people so that they are accessible within those town centres by foot and by cycle, and then the shapes will evolve themselves. That's probably, can't put it any more concise than that.
Thanks, Bryn. Okay, well, I thought it was brilliant to have Charles, you pick up on the ideas with Bea's point, and yeah, more blue sky thinking, very welcome here. If you've got a kind of thing you want to like cook up in your head and just share here, half baked, quarter baked, all welcome. So before we go to our second speaker, which is Lee, I thought we'd just quickly run the poll on when we want to have the next, the first Ideas with Beers in 2022. So the options are first week of January or second week. And that's assuming you're ready with the poll, Steve. Yes, you are. Okay, vote away.
Yeah, and can I say that just to remind you that we're definitely not doing the one in between Christmas and the New Year.
Yeah. So
very disappointed. It says there are no prizes for your participation.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Mark.
So we'll hear the result of the poll in a minute, or well, the three things we're
I think we're done.
Hang on. The three things we're going to do is we're going to have the result of the poll. Lee is going to, we have our second speaker, and also we wanted to hear from Roger. So I think I propose we'll do it in that order. And there we go. There's the result of the poll. January 11th by some way. So there we go. Brian will be pleased to know he gets a bit longer to have a breather. And we'll put that on the Twitter. So Lee, I think I saw you earlier, but I can't just put you in a box right now.
I'm here. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a bit late to the party.
Oh, well, it was a very informal session. So I don't know whether you've got some slides to share and you'd like to share them
Yes.
now. And yeah.
Let me see if I can do that. Screen one. Am I sharing the one with my notes? That's what I tend to do by mistake. Can people see the notes on the slide rather than the actual slideshow?
Yeah, we can, Lee.
Okay. Standard. Okay. Tell you what, if I just drag this across, will that make... It's because I was just using Teams before this, and now I'm all... Right, this time.
Yeah, but
there
you go.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, I was using Teams and it was showing the other screen in my last meeting I just been in, so that's why I'm all over the place. Okay, so basically there was some talk in the last meeting about cargo bikes, and I put my hand up and just said, oh, well, I'd do a presentation about cargo bikes. And then Brian immediately signed me up. So that's why I'm here. So yeah, it was sort of a practical example of, we were talking, Charles just mentioned in the last presentation about behavior change. And this is a practical example of a project I work on in London Bridge area, basically accelerating the uptake of cargo bikes. It's called Bikes for Business, and it's all about, behavior change with businesses to encourage them to use cargo bikes instead of vans or motor vehicles. And this photo that you're seeing is from the launch event, where these are all operators within London who currently use cargo bikes for their deliveries. Just a little background. So I work for MP Smarter Travel. I was previously working for PedalMe, one of the operators who are pictured in that slide. So I was doing that for 3 years, actually delivering on cargo bikes in London, as well as helping them grow as head of HR there. And prior to that, I used to work for Kingston Council as a sustainable transport officer. So I know some of you from various. Oh, and Bryn, I also used to volunteer at Sustrans. Should mention Sustrans as well. So yeah, I've had a nice varied career throughout London, but now I'm at MP Smarter Travel, and what we do is a lot of behaviour change projects linking business improvement districts or local authorities or transport bodies with their clients. So we do a lot of behaviour change work. So whether that's with LTN, low traffic neighbourhood engagement work, or with this project, getting people to use cargo bikes. We also handle a little animation showing that we feed information back the other way from the clients, collecting information from schools or from the public about any infrastructure changes that have been done by a council, for example. So why cargo bikes? I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but this is just to say, they're very eye-catching, tangible solution. People are still amazed in London about cargo bikes, what's possible to take on them, the fact that they are a clear impact, that they're quiet, they're green, they quite obviously replace a van journey for a business. It's something that they say tangible, that they can change, they can make. Just a stat in the second bullet point there is taken from Energy Saving Trust report, saying that 33% of all urban deliveries could be completed by cargo bikes. So it just gives you an idea of what's possible. And cargo bikes can carry up to 400 kilograms and travel 50 miles on one charge. I know that varies. Having worked for PedalMe, I've taken loads that are around that, but not gone 50 miles with it on one charge. But that's just to give you an idea of what's possible. So I thought I'd just tell you a few stories from the project so far. That's what these photos are examples of. So that top left is a City Sprint cargo bike. We helped basically Guy's and St Thomas's were sending pathology samples between Guy's and St Thomas's. They were using a motorbike, which was with City Sprint. It was one of their motorbikes, and we were the ones who introduced them to the idea of using City Sprint's cargo bikes. So they insisted on doing that, and they've stuck with it, even though it costs them more. And they've had some really positive publicity with a BBC piece and a Forbes article. So that was a really nice bit of behaviour change. And they actually go past every hour in front of my office now on Union Street. So I get to see that happening every day. The second one along is Laundry Heap, in the middle on the top. They have recently invested 200 million in cargo bikes for their operations worldwide. And they have these 4-wheel EAVs made in Oxford. And they are really embracing cargo bikes for their operations. We actually had them come down to an event where we talked to hotels in the area to show, what's possible on a cargo bike. And those bikes are very much aimed at replacing van trips. They've got large capacity and they look like a van almost. The top right one is a butcher based in Bermondsey. We helped him buy that cargo bike to do his local deliveries, and now we actually promote his services. So through our project, we obviously created we helped him create that new market, get new customers, and now promote him to other businesses as well, like restaurants and cafes in the area. So it's sort of it's a nice growing market through our work. Bottom left is the company I used to work for, Pedal Me. That's just gives you an idea of some of the size of things that can be taken by bike, because obviously I'm out talking to businesses every day and they say, oh, you can't do that by bike. Pedal Me's constant messages, you can do it by bike. Obviously there will be some things that they will stop them, but not much. The middle one at the bottom is a Cycling Sparks. That's an electrician in London, and we helped him buy that bike, identify which one was right for his business, helped him buy it, and now again, like the butcher, we help promote him to other businesses. So again, just keeping that cycle going of a growing market. And finally, that bottom right one is a local coffee company based in Elephant and Castle who deliver subscription coffee by cargo bike, and that was at the hotel event. So those are all hotel representatives trying out the coffee from on top of the bike. And that funky coloured box they have on the front is made out of recycled plastic containers that they use to deliver their coffee in. So I should just say that the whole project, the way that we encourage the people to use cargo bikes is that, one, we're giving the expert advice and going out and actually doing the hard graft and talking to the businesses and holding their hand through the process. But we also have a subsidy. So for the businesses in the project area, we can give them up to £700 to either help them buy their own bike or use a courier. So that's the idea being, it's a one-off payment to them to help them do that switch to the little nudge. And then we hope that they stick with it going forward. I have put this example in because I thought it was a really nice recent one where we linked up Hugo's Eco Delivery. They're a South London based delivery service, cargo trike delivery service. I linked them up with a market trader who was a supplier for a local business in Elephant and Castle. And this is just pictures of the fact that the trike could go all the way down to the market stall, right in the center of the market, which a van wouldn't be able to do. Load up by the market stall with all the fruit, and then actually deliver not just to the door, but through the door of the business at Elephant and Castle. And that's, nice story because it's linking up local businesses and showing the capabilities of the bike. A trike, sorry, in this case. Just to quickly rattle through the approach that we take at MP Smarter Travel, we've done a few of these cargo bike projects now. This is our flagship one in London Bridge, but we have worked in Brighton, in Brent, in Archway with Islington. But just to give you an idea of the process we go through, it's mapping the local cargo bike market. So we have a good understanding in London, for example, of all the different operators out there, good relationships with them all. And we identify and prioritize the target businesses. So we know from past experiences the types of businesses that are going to be the low-hanging fruit, the ones who are likely to use cargo bikes. And we kind of know what the offer is. So we know an office probably are looking at, catering for office parties or office equipment, the occasional couriering of documents. And that offer is a lot different to, say, a restaurant who's looking at their wholesalers and maybe if it's lockdown, doing home deliveries. We set up the subsidies, the marketing and the branding. So this one's Bikes for Business, and we offer the £700 subsidy. But in Brent we did a lower subsidy, and it had a different branding, which was agreed with the council there, for example. And this is what we do really well at MP Smarter Travel, is the wide scale business engagement. So where a lot of maybe cargo bike projects fall down is that they give a bike to somebody, or they tell a business about a cargo bike operator, but then they just hand it over and say, now you can go do it. But we realize that it is a bit of a step for a business to switch all their operations to cargo bikes, or some of the operations. So we try and take the faff out of it. We're doing lots of engagement, phone calls, emails, but actually walking out on the street and talking to businesses, and then helping them through the process step by step until they actually make the change, and doing the follow-up as well. Oh yeah, in person. So we'll take a cargo bike along to our meetings, and we'll show them how to the technical side of the bike and loading it up and what can be fit on there, and really walking them through it. So that's the advice. yeah, determine the eligibility and requirements for the subsidy. So we don't want to just be handing out money willy-nilly. It is about making sure that it's a switch from a motor vehicle to a cargo bike, and you know, nudging them towards the cargo bike. And then we have evaluation. So we do follow-up survey after a month and then after 3 months. And we actually, for this project in London Bridge, we have a evaluation partner who's Just Economics, they're called, and they're evaluating the whole project. Yeah, this is just an example of some of the numbers around the projects we've done so far. So the flagship ones, the one at the top, the Team London Bridge Bikes for Business I'm working on at the minute. Target is for 1,300 businesses to be engaged. So that's like meaningful conversations, and that's up until October 2022. And actually to get 300 of those to convert in some way to using cargo bikes. And then Mark, yeah, you'll see Brighton down there. 95 businesses engaged, 17 conversions. So this might be something that you might want to comment on. But yeah, that was done a little while ago. Yeah, and there's my contact details if anyone's interested in learning more. We can share documents which are basically a breakdown of all I've just said about the approach and our past experience. But yeah, happy to take any questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Lee. I can't see any immediate. All right, yeah. Let's go to Roxanne first, as you were asking in the chat as well. If anyone's got any questions, stick your hand up, and I will come to you in order.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a quick shout out firstly for your new staff member at MP Smarter Travel, Ellie Gooch. You've hired our intern, so I'm not sure if you've met her yet, but she's been involved in our cargo bike in CamCycle.
Yeah, she sits behind me, but she's gone home now. A bit late.
Oh, I'm just making you so happy that our interns are off doing great things. So you can tell her you saw me. It's actually a question that has been popping up through a cargo bike project that CamCycle is doing. We've actually hired an intern through a different funding City Changer project. I'm not sure if you've heard about that EU project. So we have an intern doing a whole range of resources about cargo cycling for businesses and individuals. So watch this space. I shall get her to come and present as well. But the question we have is about standards for cargo cycle use and training. Is there any sort of publicly available or known standard that people can go to if they're trying to know how to do this safely?
So PedalMe have tried to introduce, they've got a City and Guild accreditation for cargo bike riders. That's so you can get an official accreditation. So they have pushed the training side quite a lot. It's something that they want to happen. They want sort of a professional level, because there is some criticism still of delivery riders, and it's seen as maybe a lower standard, a lower job in some way. And I think Bikeworks also offer a cargo bike training, which is a lot shorter, because I think the PedalMe one lasts maybe 8 hours over 2 weeks. It's quite involved. It sort of matches the bikeability standard, but a bit more in terms of how to handle a large bike with load on. While I think the Bikeworks one is maybe 2 or 3 hours or something, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, there are standards out there, and I do feel like it's going to be, as it grows as an industry, they are going to, and large companies start to use cargo bike operators, they're going to push for tighter standards, because at the minute it's not enforced in any way.
Yeah, we've done training here. So there's Outspoken do training here in Cambridge and around our region. But yeah, it seems like they're training, but there's no sort of proper central cargo bike publicly known thing yet, but we should have it, I suppose.
No, and I think that's what PedalMe are trying to sort of be the ones who have it by being associated with the City and Guild. They'd like that to be the recognised standard, but whether that happens in the future or not remains to be seen.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thanks. Yes, well, obviously Lee did mention Brighton. It's good to see Lee working on that scheme, and Arun and others at MP Smarter Traveller are doing it, and the Daniel Bianco, who runs that scheme, is really doing really well on it. Actually, it's one of the capability fund schemes that Brighton got a 25% cut on for the ultra remote, so the infrastructure side of things comes back. and bites us on delivery of this, unfortunately. So they've lost 75k of their funding. So there is an implication for this sort of stuff from the other side of things that we're talking about. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. First of all, it's the training that Roxy mentioned. One of the things that Brighton's doing is having cargo bikes for community use. And I did a study for Lewis District with Richard Lewis about a year or so ago, which was something they were very keen on. Now, if you're a community group with volunteers, you're not going to want to send people through an 8-hour training program. No one's going to want to do that. So, and that's going to relate to bike share cargo bikes as well. No one's going to want to sit through that to get accreditation to be able to use that. So whilst for delivery drivers who are doing it as a job, or somebody who's part of a job who's working with it, might be worthwhile. And I know why Pedal Me are doing that. It may not be a valuable thing for the more community side of things. And I'm just wondering about some of these things like Outspoken do and Pedal Me, whether there's a shorter version that could be accredited under Bikeability, possibly. So talking to Tabs. But the other issue I wanted to raise was that one of the things that they do in Brighton is they offer subsidy to businesses that want to get a cargo bike. But it's only 125 quid, which I don't think is going to persuade any business really to buy a cargo bike of £3,000 upwards, compared to the Energy Savings Trust, which was quite a lot. But I heard recently that York offers 800 quid, which is getting nearer a sort of justifiable level of what you might want to do. So I was wondering if Lee had any examples of other places that, even possibly in London, that offer actual money to users or businesses that might want to switch.
Yeah, I mean, through our subsidy, it's £700 towards buying a cargo bike, depending on how many.
Which subsidy is that?
So that's through the Bikes for Business project.
Oh, okay.
So that subsidy is basically from the business improvement districts. So Team London Bridge, Better Bankside are providing subsidy to their members in their areas for that purchase. If it's outside their areas but within our project area, then it's coming from a charity called Impact on Urban Health. So they're providing basically the funding to pay for our services as well as the subsidy. I don't know of other funding out there in London, because the Energy Savings Trust offer was incredibly good, especially because we could put our subsidy on top of that. So at the beginning, when I joined this project in September, we had so many people who were like really keen to buy a bike, almost to and there's people who you talk to and you think you're not going to look after this bike, so I'm not sure buying one is the right idea. But there was lots of people who saw the benefit of up to £2,000 off almost, combining these subsidies.
Like there's work you talk about people who don't use them. I think every Wagamama has a cargo bike.
Yeah.
And I tweeted a photo this morning from a local coffee shop which had one which looked like it never got used. And then yesterday I was walking along in it, and there it was being used. So perhaps I was hasty in saying they don't get used, but my guess on the Wagamama ones is that they are just for show. But I may be wrong. If anyone knows differently.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I was going to come in with a point, Lee, on something you mentioned with my own experience running a cargo bike community scheme, and someone talked about communities a minute ago. It was just, I think you made this point about kind of sort of helping businesses sort of get on the first step of the kind of cargo bike ladder, and we've definitely found that with our scheme, is that a lot of how we see that what we can do is that it's about kind of showing businesses what's possible. So they kind of start doing stuff with us, with kind of riders provided for them, and maybe we start delivering something that they think is suitable. And it kind of provides a way for them to try out how cargo bikes work. And then quite a few of them have then gone on to kind of get their own bikes. So it's like giving them this sort of nursery slope where they don't take any risks. They don't have to buy a bike. They get to work with us. And then because we are a community scheme, we're not a business model, we don't mind then them kind of running with it. So it's interesting, the different ways that you can help people take that step. So just a bit of extra context. Lee, did you want to come back on anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to Roger now, because Roger has got an update for us. If anyone else has got a question for Lee, if they could post it in the chat, and we'll come back to it if we've got time. So Lee, is there anything you wanted to come back on? Otherwise, I'll ask Roger to share his update, and then we'll come back to you at the end.
No, that's fine. I'll post stuff in the chat if there's anything.
Yeah, so people do that. And then, so we talked about the crime and police and crime sentencing. There's some words I've mixed up there, but that bill, and about the things that the changes that might be happening around sentencing related to road crime. So Roger wasn't there at the beginning of our session tonight, but he has got stuff he can update us on. So over to you, Roger.
Great, yes, thank you very much. And it's good to be back. I haven't been along to one of these sessions. That was just simply because I failed to spot the email giving me the updated link while I was on holiday a couple of months ago. So apologies for having missed out on our load chat. Apologies for being a bit late with this session. But yes, update on the police, crime, sentencing and courts bill. People have been following this little saga. The government promised a review of road traffic offences and penalties back in 2014 and then never carried it out. They then instead sort of did a very limited review in 2016, 2017, where they considered and then got support to do 3 little things which are very headline grabbing, but actually won't make a huge amount of difference to the vast majority of cases that we're concerned about. So they're proposing to increase the maximum sentence for causing death by dangerous driving from 14 years to life. Similarly, for causing death by careless driving while under the influence, increasing from 14 years to life, and introducing a new offence of causing serious injury by what is termed careless driving. The combination could actually mean that the drivers who have killed have an increased incentive to argue that their driving was merely careless, not dangerous, in order to avoid the risk of a lifetime sentence. Meanwhile, the other amendment, adding the new offence of causing serious injury by careless, could do exactly what happened when they introduced causing death by careless back in 2008. It meant that a whole load of cases that would have previously been dangerous end up being careless. So it's one of those things that sounds very superficially very appealing to politicians, and politicians have been gagging for the government to do these things that the government promised to do back in 2017, whereas we're still saying, what about the wider review of road traffic offences and penalties that the government promised in 2014, that goes back to more basic principles of what are the definitions of careless and dangerous driving and the associated maximum penalties, plus a whole load of other things too, including introducing a new offence for hit and run, to give its correct title, failing to stop and report following a collision, not accident, in cases where the collision, not accident, has caused serious or fatal injury. And things like closing the exceptional hardship loophole, whereby lots of drivers reach 12 points, but then claim that they can't be banned, surely, please magistrate, please judge, because that will cause me exceptional hardship. And this is granted in 1 in 5 cases, which doesn't sound very exceptional to me. So those are all things that are on our wish list of things that we want included in a wider review of road traffic offences and penalties. And you'll see, some of you will have read blogs who have been tracking this through the Lords, through the Commons and then the Lords. The update is that last night, in a Lords debate on the police, crime, sentencing and courts bill, the government finally said not just that they are considering a call for evidence, which is what they'd said 2 weeks ago in Commons, they are now actually scoping out a review of road traffic offences and penalties. Hallelujah. This may not sound like a huge leap forward, and on the face of it, it's not, because it's only the government finally getting around to doing something that they promised to do in 2014, so what's the big deal? What's changed is firstly that we've now got a whole load of MPs and peers who have come out in support of all this in the push to get the government to finally do what they promised to do in 2014. So it'll be, for that reason alone, it'll now be much harder for the government to just find another excuse to kick into the long grass all over again. And the other thing is that this time we circulated a parliamentary briefing that was supported by not just the usual suspects of the Road Danger Reduction Forum and Road Peace and Living Streets and British Cycling, but also the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Transport Safety and the RAC. So this means that it's a much broader coalition that is calling for this wider review and for those specific proposals around exceptional hardship and sorting out the hit and run offences where they've caused obvious danger. where they've caused death or serious injury. So the question now is, we've got to influence the scope of the review. So there are some things that I've already mentioned that we will obviously, of course, push for in the scope of the review. But what about drink drive limits? What about handheld mobile phone offences? Do we push for those to be included to discuss? I'll leave that thought for another time, because we are now up to 6:30. Yes, Bob, you are absolutely right. It was the RAC, but not the RAC Foundation who joined in, and you're right, they're distinct organisations. But I'm fairly confident we will get the RAC Foundation. They've been sort of on the edge of signing up, and the AA just didn't quite sign up because they've got a more complex process for getting sign up to these things. They have to go to their trustees, but I'm fairly confident that we will have them on board too. There's also a petty.
Roger, just before
there was an amendment.
Roger, just before you can I just, because we will wrap up in a minute, but can I just ask David to ask his question just before you move on into other things? And David's got his hand up.
Thanks very much. Just the question is about the way that drivers escape bans despite having so many penalty points because of mitigating circumstances, which seems a bizarre quirk of the law. I mean, you don't get, mitigating circumstances for if you've stabbed someone because you need a knife to for your living. Is that going to be included in the scope?
We will certainly be pushing for it. I'm reasonably optimistic that the number of MPs and peers who've made a noise about this, in addition to us, means it'll be very difficult for the government to not include it in the scope. They have been saying, we don't think that the amendment that we tabled was necessary, but I think it'd be very difficult for them now to say we shouldn't even think about it. So it's up to us to push for it, but I'm reasonably optimistic that we will succeed. Fingers crossed. But join in as soon as we see a campaign call for action to push via your MPs to make sure that these are within the scope of the call for evidence. Please join in.
Does this depend on Boris, Shapps and Gilligan remaining in place?
Good question. There are all sorts of other things that will depend on Boris and Gilligan remaining in place. I suspect that the review will now happen, and it doesn't depend on, actually Gilligan and Boris have not been involved in this one. So I'm fairly confident that this is one thing that will continue regardless of whether they stay in post. There are other things that are more risky.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And Roger, before we finish, can I just ask then, is it worth us spending some dedicated time at Ideas with Beers in the new year, asking this group for thoughts on that scope, or do you have to act quicker, or is it worth us having, the thoughts of this group in a sort of bit of a brain dump and fed into you?
I think that if you're up for it, I'd be more than happy to kind of just open up that discussion and seek input. As I say, there are some things that sort of have already written themselves in the script, for things we've already been campaigning on, and then there are some things that we could potentially add to the script. And yeah, I'm open to a discussion if you want to do that. It's not too late. Early mid-January would not be too late.
It wouldn't. Okay, yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about that with the others. So I think on that note, and it's just after 6:30, is everybody happy that we finish there for the week? Okay.
I've got my very quick last word, Claire.
Yes, I did message you in the chat, Ruth, but I didn't.
I know, and I replied.
I didn't see that, sorry.
Okay. It is very quick, if people don't mind. So very quickly, Barnes Community Association have designed a wonderful shuttle thing. I don't know what to call it really. They can't call it a cab because the cabbies objected. Surprise, surprise. But they're looking for sponsorship, but it is awesome and it's painted green and they need money and they're going to run it on a 8 till 7 phone from home if you want it to go to the hospital to get across the bridge. And I just think that's really exciting. And if we get it and if they get it, that will be amazing and awesome. And possibly we could have it in all the royal parks. That's my last word.